My name is Samantha Reed. I'm 27 years old. And the strange thing about the moment your life starts splitting open in public is that it does not always arrive sounding like disaster. Sometimes there is no screaming at first, no shattered glass, no dramatic silence heavy enough to warn your body to brace. Sometimes it walks in dressed like celebration. Sometimes the room is full of soft lighting, expensive perfume, pressed clothes, polished smiles, and only one person in the room can feel the floor moving beneath her feet. 3 hours before everything shifted, I was standing in front of my bedroom mirror, trying not to look as nervous as I felt. I work as a warehouse supervisor for a logistics company. It is not glamorous work, and nobody on social media would call it aspirational, but it is honest. I manage a team of 12 people. I handle inventory worth millions of dollars. I solve problems fast, stay late when I have to, and in 3 years, I had not had a major incident on my watch. I made around $52,000 a year, with decent benefits and enough pride in my paycheck to sleep well at night. I had never been ashamed of that, not until I fell in love with a man who kept teaching me how other people might measure me. His name was Evan Carter. He worked in marketing for a tech startup, one of those places where everyone talked like they were 3 clever sentences away from changing the world. The company had just closed a massive funding round, $40 million in Series B, which apparently meant champagne towers, dramatic speeches, and an invitation-only celebration at a venue too expensive to list prices online. Evan had been talking about that party for weeks, what he was going to wear, who would be there, how important it was to make the right impression, how his CEO had specifically invited partners. We had been together for 2.5 years and living together for 8 months, long enough that our toothbrushes sat side by side, our groceries blurred together, and I could tell what mood he was in from the sound of the front door closing. Long enough that I should have noticed sooner how often his comments about me came wrapped in concern. At first, it had been little things. Maybe a softer haircut. Maybe nicer shoes when we went out. Maybe I did not need to wear my work boots to the grocery store. He would say it casually, smiling, touching my arm, like he was helping me become some shinier version of myself. I let a lot of it slide because that is what people tell you love requires, right? Compromise, flexibility, growth. So I got the haircut. I bought better shoes. I started second-guessing outfits I used to throw on without thinking. And when he told me this party mattered, I decided I wanted to show up for him completely. Not halfway. Not resentfully. Completely. So I bought an outfit. Not just anything pulled from a rack because I panicked the week before. I researched. I watched videos. I read articles about tailoring, fabrics, silhouettes, what makes something look expensive even when it is not. I found a boutique that did alterations properly, not some rush chain store where strangers pinned your clothes while looking over your shoulder. I chose a charcoal sheath dress with a structured blazer, elegant without being loud. I had the waist taken in, the hem adjusted, the shoulders cleaned up so it sat perfectly. I added simple heels, understated jewelry, and a handbag I absolutely could not justify, except that I had already gone this far and wanted, for once, to feel like I belonged in the room beside him. The total came to a number that made my stomach tighten, a little over $1,200, nearly a month of my take-home pay after rent and bills. I paid anyway, because when I looked at myself in the mirror after the final fitting, I felt beautiful. Not trendy, not flashy, not trying too hard, just beautiful, capable. Composed, like the kind of woman who could walk into any room and not apologize for taking up space. The night of the event, I got ready early. I showered, dried my hair twice because the first round did not sit right, redid my makeup after deciding it looked too heavy, and checked myself in the mirror more times than I want to admit. Evan was still in the bathroom finishing his hair when I stepped into the bedroom in the full outfit. For 1 second, I honestly thought I might get the reaction I had been hoping for. That soft look people get when they are proud to love you. That little pause. That smile. Instead, he turned, looked at me, and laughed. Not a surprise laugh. Not an affectionate one. A real laugh. Sharp and dismissive. The kind that lands before your mind can protect you from it. I stopped in the doorway. "What?" I asked. He looked me up and down again. "You're really wearing that to my company party?" It took a second for the words to fully reach me. "What's wrong with it?" He tilted his head like he was trying to figure out how honest to be. "I mean, it's fine for like a funeral or maybe some corporate awards dinner in the suburbs. But this is a tech party, Sam. People are going to be in designer stuff, trendy cuts, fashion-forward looks. That outfit is just so..." He gave a small shrug. "Safe?" I stared at him. I spent over $1,000 on this, I said quietly. It's tailored. Yeah, but tailored doesn't automatically mean current. His tone stayed maddeningly calm, which somehow made it worse. Like I was the only one standing in the blast radius of what he was saying. You told me it was formal. Formal doesn't mean boring. The room went very still. I could hear the hum of the bathroom fan, a car outside, my own pulse in my ears. He sighed, softer now, as if I were the difficult one. I just don't want people to think my girlfriend doesn't know how to dress. There are sentences that do not sound violent until after they land. That was one of them. Because there I was, standing in the most expensive outfit I had ever bought, an outfit I had researched and paid for and altered and defended to myself in a dozen quiet moments of guilt. And the man I loved was looking at me like I was a liability. Like I was something he would have to explain. I tried to laugh it off, I really did. But something inside my chest had already gone cold. I thought I looked good, I said. He softened his voice even more then, the way people do when they want credit for being gentle while they are still cutting you open. You do look good, just not for this. Maybe wear that black skirt instead? Or the cream blouse I bought you? Something less rigid. Rigid. I do not know why that word stayed with me more than the others. Maybe because I had bent for him so many times already. Maybe because he was looking at a woman who had reshaped herself in 100 quiet ways and still found something stiff to criticize. I looked at myself once more in the mirror. For one disorienting second, I saw us the way a stranger might. A polished man adjusting his cufflinks. A woman beside him trying to figure out how much of herself needed to be erased to remain lovable. And suddenly I felt tired. Not dramatic, not furious, just tired in a deep soul-level way. You're right, I said. His face brightened with relief. Thank you. I knew you'd understand. Of course he did. He thought this was going to go the way it always went. I would absorb the insult, reframe it as feedback, make the adjustment, help him feel comfortable again. He turned back toward the mirror, already moving on. I walked to the closet. I changed out of the dress carefully, more carefully than I had put it on. I hung up the blazer, slid the heels back into their box, wiped off my lipstick. Then I pulled on jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and my everyday sneakers. When I came back into the bedroom with my keys and wallet in my hand, he frowned. What are you doing? I'm going to watch the game. He blinked. What? The game at Murphy's. The party starts in an hour. Yeah, I said. I'm not going to the party. For the first time that evening, he actually looked rattled. What do you mean you're not going? I met his eyes. You just told me I'm not good enough to stand next to you at this event, so I'm removing the problem. His face hardened instantly. That is not what I said. You said you didn't want people to think your girlfriend doesn't know how to dress. I was trying to help you. By laughing at me? That's not fair. No, I said. What you did wasn't fair. He stepped toward me then, voice sharpening. You are seriously overreacting. This night matters to me. And I tried to make it matter to me too. You're being dramatic. Maybe. I opened the bedroom door. But I'm also leaving. Sam. There was warning in the way he said my name now. Not tenderness, not concern. Warning. I looked back at him once. He was standing in the center of our bedroom in a perfectly fitted suit, irritated that the woman who had just been humiliated was refusing to do it more gracefully. Have fun at your party, I said. Then I walked out. The drive to Murphy's felt unreal. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but the rest of me felt delayed, like the hurt was still catching up somewhere behind me. Streetlights smeared across the windshield. My phone buzzed once, then again, then stopped. I ignored it. Murphy's was exactly what it had always been. Too loud, too familiar, full of people who did not care what label was stitched into your jacket. A game blaring from too many screens at once. The smell of fried food and beer and old wood. My best friend Maya was already there. She took one look at my face and did not ask stupid questions. She just flagged the bartender, ordered me a drink, and waited. I sat down beside her and let out a breath that felt like I had been holding it for months. What happened? She asked finally. So I told her. All of it. The outfit. The laugh. The words. The way he had looked relieved when I agreed to change. By the time I was done, Maya's expression had gone from concern to pure disgust. He laughed, she said. I nodded. At the outfit you bought for him? Yes. She muttered a few things about Evan that were creative, deeply uncharitable, and honestly deserved. I laughed in spite of myself. Then the game started, and for 2 hours I got to be somebody other than the woman trying to understand why love had started feeling like a performance review. Around 10 o'clock, my phone began vibrating nonstop against the table. I flipped it over. Text after text from Evan. Where are you? People keep asking about you. My CEO specifically asked to meet my partner. This is so embarrassing. Call me back now. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Not "are you okay?" Not "can we talk?" Not even "why did you leave?" Just embarrassment. Just inconvenience. Just me, once again, as a problem to manage. I turned my phone face down and ordered another round. That night, I slept on Maya's couch. The next morning, sunlight hit me in the face through a gap in the blinds, and my head felt packed with sand. I reached for my phone before I was fully awake. 19 missed calls, 34 texts, 1 voicemail. I listened to the voicemail sitting upright, bare feet on Maya's rug, my stomach tightening line by line. "I cannot believe you did this to me," Evan said. His voice was low, furious, controlled in that way that made the anger feel even colder. "Do you have any idea how humiliating it was to explain where you were, to tell my CEO that my girlfriend just didn't show up? I looked like an idiot. I looked like I was lying about even having a partner. This was the most important night of my career, Samantha, and you ruined it because of your fragile ego. We are talking about this when you get home." The message ended with a click. I stared at the phone for a long moment. Then I saved the voicemail. I did not know exactly why yet, only that something in me had started to understand this was no longer just a fight. It was the beginning of a story he was already writing about me. And if I was not careful, I was going to end up cast as the villain in my own life. When I walked back into the apartment later that morning, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage someone had already prepared for a confrontation. Evan was in the living room, exactly where I expected him to be, sitting upright on the couch, arms crossed, still in yesterday's clothes, but somehow looking sharper than I felt, like he had been rehearsing. Waiting. The second I stepped inside, he looked up. "Do you have any idea what you did to me?" he started. No hello, no pause. Just straight into accusation. I set my keys down slowly and stayed standing for a moment before sitting across from him. "I went to watch a game," I said, instead of going to a party where my presence was apparently an embarrassment. His jaw tightened. "I never said you were an embarrassment." I let out a quiet breath. "You laughed at me. You said you didn't want people to think your girlfriend doesn't know how to dress. How exactly am I supposed to interpret that?" "I was trying to help you," he shot back. "I didn't want you to feel out of place." "By telling me I look like something your dad would wear?" For a split second, he didn't have a response. And I saw it, that flicker. Not guilt, not regret, just recalculation. He leaned forward, shifting tone like flipping a switch. "The point is," he said, slower now, more controlled, "you made a choice. You chose your pride over supporting me at an important event." I stared at him. "No," I said quietly. "I chose my self-respect over being treated like something you were ashamed to bring." "That's not fair." Neither was laughing at me. Silence stretched between us, then snapped. We went in circles for the next hour. Same arguments, same words, same refusal to actually meet in the middle. He wanted an apology for embarrassing him, for not showing up, for making a scene by not attending. I wanted something simpler, an acknowledgement, a basic human, "I shouldn't have treated you like that." But every time we got close to that point, he pulled the conversation back into his version of events. "I was helping. You misunderstood. You're overreacting." Eventually, he said something that stuck. "My coworkers keep asking what happened," he said, frustration leaking through again. "What am I supposed to tell them?" I held his gaze. "Tell them the truth." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Which is what? That my girlfriend threw a tantrum because I gave her fashion advice?" Something inside me went very still. "Is that what you think happened?" I asked. "That's what it looks like." "Then maybe you should think about why it looks that way." His expression hardened instantly. "You are impossible to talk to. And you are impossible to be honest with." That was it. That was the moment the conversation stopped being a conversation. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "I can't do this right now," he said. "You twist everything. And you rewrite everything." He didn't respond to that, just turned and walked toward the bedroom, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the frame. I sat there alone on the couch for a long time after that, listening to the quiet, trying to understand how two people could live in the same moment and walk away with completely different versions of reality. Pew. The next few days were worse. Not louder, not more explosive, just colder. Evan didn't yell anymore. He didn't need to. He switched to something more subtle, more effective. Comments. Small, precise, passive-aggressive comments that landed like paper cuts. "Are you wearing that to work? Your friend Maya is a bad influence. You always shut down when things get serious. You really don't know how to communicate like an adult." Every conversation felt like stepping into a minefield. I started measuring my words before I spoke. Started noticing how often I was defending myself against things I hadn't actually done. And then his people got involved. The first message came from his best friend. You really need to apologize to him. He's devastated. Then his sister. I heard what happened. You should be ashamed. He was counting on you. Then a woman I'd met maybe twice at one of his office happy hours. Wow. Imagine ditching your boyfriend at a work event. Real mature. I stared at the messages, one after another. Different voices. Same story. A story I didn't recognize. In their version, I was the unstable girlfriend. The one who couldn't handle a little feedback. The one who sabotaged the most important night of his career over something as trivial as clothes. I didn't reply to any of them. Not one. But I did something else. I screenshotted everything. Every message. Every accusation. And I saved them, along with the voicemail. Because something about it all felt organized. Too consistent. Like the narrative had been prepared before I even realized I was part of it. By the fourth day, I was exhausted. Not just emotionally. Mentally. Physically. There is a specific kind of fatigue that comes from constantly defending your reality. From replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you really did misunderstand. If maybe you were too sensitive. If maybe you should have just changed your outfit and gone. That was the dangerous part. Not his words. Not the messages. But the slow, creeping doubt. He came home that evening with a different energy. Calmer. Collected. Like he had reached a conclusion. Can we talk? He asked. I nodded. We sat across from each other again. Same positions as before. But this time something felt final. I've been thinking, he said, and I've talked to some people about what happened. Who? I asked. My friends, my mom, my therapist. Of course he had. I see. And I think we need to have a serious conversation about where this relationship is going. I agree, I said. That seemed to catch him slightly off guard. He leaned forward. I need a partner who can show up for me, he said. Someone who can put aside their ego for one night to support my career. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder if you're capable of that. I let the words sit between us. Then I answered. And I need a partner who doesn't humiliate me for trying to look my best, I said. Who doesn't laugh at something I worked hard to afford. Who doesn't make me feel like I'm not good enough to stand next to him. I didn't. You did, I cut in. And instead of acknowledging it, you spent 4 days making me the villain. Because you are the villain here. The words landed heavier than I expected. But they didn't break me. Not anymore. You left me at my company party, he continued, after I asked you to make a simple adjustment. After you told me I wasn't dressed well enough to be seen with you. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. We stared at each other, and I could see it. The decision forming behind his eyes. He could apologize. He could step back. Or he could double down. He chose to double down. Fine, he said, leaning back. If that's how you see it, then maybe we need some space. Space? I repeated. I think it would be best if you stayed somewhere else for a while, until we figure things out. For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard him. You want me to leave? I said slowly. The apartment we both pay rent for, because you insulted me? I need space to process, he said. And clearly, you're not going to give me that if you're here. I almost laughed. Almost. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. The audacity. The way he had repositioned himself so completely as the victim that asking me to leave felt, to him, reasonable, expected, normal. I studied his face for a long moment. This man I had built a life with. This man I had bent for, adjusted for. And I realized something. He was waiting. Waiting for me to argue. To plead. To negotiate my place in a home I helped pay for. To promise I'd do better. To apologize. To come back smaller. Easier. More convenient. Instead, I nodded. Okay. He blinked. Okay? Yeah, I said. I'll pack a bag tonight. Stay with Maya for a few days. Relief flooded his face so quickly it almost hurt to watch. Thank you, he said. I think this is for the best. Oh, I said softly. I understand completely. And I did. I understood that he thought this was temporary. That I would go, cool off, reflect, and come back ready to fix things. Ready to fix myself. What he didn't understand was that I was already done fixing things that were never broken in the first place. That night, I packed a bag. Not everything. Just enough. Clothes, essentials, my laptop. I left the dress hanging in the closet, carefully, like something that still mattered. Maya didn't ask questions when I showed up. She just opened the door, stepped aside, and said, "Guest room's ready." Later, she handed me a beer and leaned against the kitchen counter. "So," she said, "what's the plan?" I took a slow sip. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm not apologizing for having self-respect." She nodded once. "Good," she said, "don't." I stared at the bottle in my hand, at the reflection of kitchen light in the glass. And for the first time in days, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace. Not yet. But certainty. Whatever came next, I wasn't going back to being someone who had to earn the right to be seen. The first few days at Maya's place passed in a strange kind of quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like suspended. Like my life had been paused mid-scene, and everything was waiting for someone to say cut. I went to work, came home, ate whatever Maya shoved in front of me because she didn't trust me to remember to feed myself properly. I ignored my phone except for work messages. Ignored social media completely. Ignored the growing knot in my chest that kept whispering something isn't right. I told myself I needed time. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to figure out whether I was actually done, or just hurt enough to think I was. Then, on the 7th day, my phone lit up with a name I didn't expect. Lily Tran, one of Evan's co-workers. We'd met a few times at office happy hours. She'd always been polite, a little reserved, the kind of person who watched more than she spoke. Her message was simple. Hey, I know this is weird, but can we talk? Coffee? I stared at it for a long moment. Something about the wording made my stomach tighten. Not curiosity. Not drama. Something else. Something careful. I typed back. Sure, when? We met the next afternoon at a small cafe near my work. Neutral ground. Public enough to feel safe. Private enough to talk. Lily was already there when I arrived, sitting with her hands wrapped around a coffee she hadn't touched. The second she saw me, she gave a small, tight smile. Hey, she said. Hey. I sat down across from her. Up close, she looked uncomfortable, like she was carrying something she wasn't sure she wanted to hand over. I'm really sorry to reach out like this, she said quickly. I felt like you should know something. My chest tightened. Okay, I said carefully. She hesitated, then took a breath. At the party, she said, the one you didn't come to, something happened. The words landed heavier than they should have, because part of me already knew, or maybe just feared. What do you mean? I asked. Lily glanced down at her coffee, then back up at me. Evan didn't spend the night alone, she said. He was with someone, most of the night. My fingers curled slightly around the edge of the table. With who? A woman from product development. Her name's Kara. The name meant nothing to me, but the tone did. How with? I asked. Lily swallowed. They were close, she said. Like, really close. People noticed. Close, I repeated. As in? Dancing together, she said, sitting next to each other during the speeches. He kept touching her arm, leaning in when they talked, laughing like they were the only two people in the room. Each detail felt like the small, precise incision. Not enough to break me, enough to bleed. That could just be networking, I said automatically. Even as I said it, I heard how thin it sounded. Lily nodded slowly. It could, she said, except at the end of the night, they left together. The world went very quiet. In his car? I asked. She shook her head. In hers. The air left my lungs in a slow, controlled exhale. He told me he went home, I said. He didn't, she replied gently. I saw them leave. A few of us did. I stared at the table, at the tiny scratches in the wood, at my own reflection, warped in the surface of my untouched coffee. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Lily hesitated, then said, because of what he's been saying about you at work. I looked up. What do you mean? He's been telling people you abandoned him, she said, that you're controlling, that you couldn't handle his success, that you made a scene and then refused to support him. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Of course he is. And I'm sitting there, she continued, listening to all of that, knowing he spent the entire night with another woman and then left with her. She shook her head slightly. It didn't sit right with me. I held her gaze. You don't know what happened after they left, I said. No, she admitted. I don't. And I'm not going to pretend I do, but I know what I saw, and I know what he's saying doesn't match it. Silence settled between us. Thick, heavy, real. Thank you, I said finally. She nodded. Just please don't say it was me, she added quickly. I don't want to get pulled into this. I won't. She looked relieved. We finished our drinks in a kind of quiet understanding, then went our separate ways. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after that, not moving, not thinking, just sitting. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. And everything started rearranging itself in my mind. The laughter, the criticism, the pressure to change, the fight. The way he had seemed almost relieved when I said I wouldn't go, like the problem had solved itself. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. That night, I sent him a message. We need to talk, in person, tomorrow. He responded within minutes. Fine. We met at a coffee shop halfway between his office and Maya's place. Neutral, public, controlled. He was already there when I arrived. Sitting with a latte like this was just another casual conversation. Are you ready to have a real conversation now? He asked as I sat down. I looked at him. Really looked. At the man I had shared a bed with. A future with. a life with, and wondered how much of him I had actually known. Yeah, I said. Let's start with what happened after the party. His expression flickered. What do you mean? I mean after it ended, I said. How did you get home? I took an Uber, he said immediately. Too immediately. You're sure about that? His eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, why? Because I heard you left with someone. A pause. Small, but real. What are you talking about? He asked. A woman from product development, I said. Kara. For a split second, just a split second, his face gave him away. Surprise. Then calculation. Then something that looked dangerously close to panic. Who told you that? He demanded. Does it matter? Yes, it does, because it's not true. I held his gaze. Multiple people saw you get in her car. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. She offered me a ride, he said. My phone was dead. I couldn't get an Uber. I leaned back slightly. You have a portable charger, I said. You showed it to me last month when I forgot mine. Another flicker. It wasn't charged, he said quickly. Right. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're accusing me of something based on office gossip? I'm asking you what happened. I told you she gave me a ride home. Were you with her all night? His jaw tightened. We talked. That's it. You danced with her. It was a party. You sat together. You were touching her. Oh my God, he said, throwing his hands up. Are you seriously doing this right now? I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. I'm asking what happened. Nothing happened, he said flatly. She drove me home. I got out. I went inside. End of story. I watched him. Really watched him. The tension in his shoulders. The way his eyes wouldn't quite stay steady. The gaps between his answers. 3 years. 2.5 years of building something I thought was solid. And this was what it came down to. I don't believe you, I said quietly. His expression hardened instantly. That's your problem. Maybe, I said, but I'm done either way. The words hung there. Heavy. Final. He blinked. Done with what? With this, I said. With us. He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You're breaking up with me because of a rumor? I'm ending a relationship with someone who humiliated me, tried to push me out of my own home, and can't give me a straight answer about what happened that night. This is insane. Maybe. You're being paranoid. Maybe. You're throwing away 2.5 years over nothing. Not nothing, I said softly. Over everything. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he laughed again. That same laugh. Sharp. Dismissive. Familiar. You're going to regret this, he said. I stood up, left a few bills on the table for my coffee. Maybe, I said. Then I walked away. He followed me out into the parking lot. Samantha, he called after me. You're making a mistake. I kept walking. You think anyone's going to believe you? He shouted. Over me? You're acting crazy. I reached my car, opened the door. You're going to regret this, he repeated. I paused for half a second. Not to turn back, just to breathe. Then I got in, shut the door, and drove away. And this time, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The next time I went back to the apartment, I didn't go alone. Maya insisted on coming with me, and for once, I didn't argue. Not because I was afraid Evan would be there, but because I didn't trust myself to walk through that space, our space, and not feel something crack open all over again. We parked outside just after noon. The building looked exactly the same. Same glass doors, same neutral-colored walls, same quiet lobby that had once felt like the beginning of something stable. Now it just felt hollow. You good? Maya asked as we stepped out of the car. I nodded. I will be. That was the truth. Not I am, but I will be. The apartment was empty when we walked in, either by coincidence or design. I didn't ask which. Didn't want to know. I moved through the room slowly at first, like I was walking through a memory instead of a place. The couch where we'd watched movies. The kitchen where we had argued about stupid things like groceries and dishes and whose turn it was to cook. The bedroom. I stopped at the doorway for a moment, then walked in. The dress was still there, hanging exactly where I left it, untouched. For a second, I just looked at it. All that effort, all that hope, all that quiet excitement that had turned into something else entirely. I stepped forward, took it off the hanger carefully, and folded it into the suitcase. Not because I couldn't leave it behind, but because it was mine, and I wasn't leaving pieces of myself here anymore. We worked methodically after that. Clothes, books, my laptop setup, kitchen things I'd bought before we moved in together. The little details that add up to a life. 3 hours later, the apartment looked like someone had erased me from it, which in a way, I guess was exactly what had been happening long before I packed a single bag. I walked to the counter, set my key down, stood there for a moment longer than I needed to, then turned and walked out. No note, no message, nothing left to say. The days that followed were messy, not dramatic, not explosive, just disorienting, finding a new place to stay long term. updating my address, adjusting to sleeping alone after 2.5 years of shared space and shared routines. There's a specific kind of silence that follows a breakup like that. It's not peaceful. It's loud in its own way, full of things you're no longer saying. Texts you almost send, jokes you almost share, habits that don't know where to go anymore. I caught myself reaching for my phone more than once, then stopping, then remembering. And every time, it landed a little differently. Less sharp, more real. Evan never contacted me directly after that, not once. By the time I got the rest of my things, I was blocked on everything. Phone, social media, even email. But the messages still came, just from other people. Mutual friends, acquaintances, people who had only ever seen one side of the story. I heard you accused him of cheating without proof. He says you were controlling the whole relationship. You couldn't handle his success, so you sabotaged him. You really should have just gone to the party. I read them, all of them, and I didn't respond. Because there's a point where defending yourself stops being about truth and starts being about convincing people who already decided not to believe you. And I wasn't going to beg for that. About a week after the breakup, Lily messaged me again. This time there was no hesitation. Just a simple, "Hey, I thought you should know." We met again. Same cafe. Same table. But this time, there was less tension in her posture. More certainty. "They've been close for a while," she said without preamble. "How long is a while?" I asked. She hesitated. "Months," she said. "At least." I let that settle. "All those lunches," she added. "People thought it was just work stuff at first, but it wasn't just that." I nodded slowly. Pieces clicking into place. "And after the party?" I asked. She shifted slightly. "There were rumors about the parking garage," she said carefully. "I didn't see it myself, so I'm not going to say anything definitive. But people are talking." Of course they were. "They're not exactly being subtle anymore," she added. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thank you," I said. Again. And I meant it. Because clarity, even painful clarity, is still better than doubt. 3 days later, she texted me. "It's official. They're together. He posted it." I didn't look. I didn't need to. Because by then, I already knew. Not just what had happened, but how it had happened. The slow shift, the emotional distance, the subtle criticisms, the pressure to change, the laugh, the fight, the narrative. It wasn't random. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a transition. And I had just been the inconvenient middle step. The suit, no, the dress. That night, it was never really about the dress. It was about creating a reason. A moment he could point to later and say, "That's when everything fell apart. That's when she pushed me away. That's why I moved on." Except the truth was simpler than that. He had already moved on. He just needed the story to catch up. And I had been cast, very carefully, as the reason. Here's the thing no one tells you about moments like that. Understanding the truth doesn't make it hurt less. It just makes the pain sharper, cleaner, harder to argue with. I still lost 2.5 years. I still had to rebuild my life from the ground up. I still had nights where everything felt too quiet, too empty, too unfamiliar. But I also had something else, something I didn't have before. Clarity. When he laughed at me, I chose not to shrink. When he asked me to apologize, I chose not to lie. When he told me to leave, I chose not to beg. And when he couldn't give me the truth, I chose to walk away. Completely. A few weeks later, I wore that dress again. Not to impress anyone. Not to prove anything. Just because I wanted to. It was for a coworker's wedding. Nothing extravagant. No tech investors. No curated image. Just people who showed up as themselves. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to earn my place in the room. I didn't feel like someone beside me was silently evaluating whether I belonged. I just existed. Comfortably. Confidently. Like I had every right to be there. A woman came up to me halfway through the night, smiled, and said, "You look amazing. Where did you get that dress?" I told her. We talked for a few minutes. Then she walked away. No judgment. No hidden meaning. Just kindness. It felt unfamiliar. And then, slowly, it started to feel normal. People have asked me if I regret not going to the party. If maybe things would have turned out differently if I had just changed. Just gone. Just played along for one night. But the answer is no. Because if I had gone, I would have spent the night watching him build something with someone else. Smiling through it. Pretending not to see it. Becoming smaller and quieter just to keep the illusion intact. Instead, I was at a sports bar. Laughing with my best friend. Being exactly who I was without apology. And given the choice, I'd make that same decision again. Every time. I'm still rebuilding. New place. New routines. New version of a life I didn't expect to have. But it's mine. Fully. Honestly. And I'm not carrying anyone else's narrative into it. The dress came with me. So did everything I refused to give up to keep someone else comfortable. That's enough. More than enough.